Trump and Powell at the Federal Reserve, a tale of tensions and renovations. A stage set for conflict. On a humid July morning in 2025, Washington, D.C., buzzed with its usual blend of political fervor and bureaucratic hum. The city, a labyrinth of power and ambition, was no stranger to high-stakes confrontations, but the events about to unfold at the Federal Reserve's headquarters on Constitution Avenue were extraordinary, even by its standards. President Donald Trump, now in his second term, was preparing to make a rare visit to the central bank, a move that sent ripples of anticipation through financial markets, political circles, and the media. At his side would be Federal Reserve Chair Jerome Powell, a man who had become both a lightning rod for Trump's criticisms and a steadfast defender of the Fed's independence. The visit, ostensibly to inspect a $2.5 billion renovation project mired in cost overruns, was less about construction and more about a broader struggle for control over the nation's economic policy. The Federal Reserve, often cloaked in an aura of technocratic mystique, is not a place presidents typically visit. Its marble-clad headquarters, the Mariner S. Beckles building, and the adjacent 1951 Constitution Avenue building, stand as symbols of economic stability, insulated from the political fray. Yet, on July 24, 2025, these buildings became the backdrop for a public clash between two men with vastly different visions for America's economic future. Trump, ever the showman, saw the visit as an opportunity to spotlight what he called wasteful spending and to pressure Powell into lowering interest rates, a policy move Trump believed would supercharge the economy. Powell, reserved and methodical, stood firm, defending the Fed's autonomy and the necessity of the renovations. Their encounter, captured by cameras and dissected by analysts, would reveal the fault lines of a deeper conflict, one between political power and institutional independence. The road to July 24. To understand the significance of Trump's visit, one must first trace the history of his contentious relationship with the Federal Reserve and its chair. When Trump nominated Powell as Fed chair in 2017, it was a pragmatic choice. Powell, a seasoned banker and lawyer with a reputation for moderation, seemed like a safe bet to steer the central bank through turbulent economic waters. But the honeymoon was short-lived. By 2018, as the Fed began raising interest rates to cool an overheating economy, Trump's frustration boiled over. He called Powell a numbskull, a disaster, and even suggested he was a bigger threat to the economy than Chinese President Xi Jinping. The insults were classic Trump, blunt, personal, and designed to provoke. Yet Powell, with his lawyerly demeanor, remained unfazed, emphasizing the Fed's mandate to balance inflation and employment, not to bend to political whims. The tension escalated in Trump's second term, which began in January 2025. With the U.S. economy showing signs of strength but grappling with inflationary pressures from Trump's proposed tariffs, the Fed opted to keep interest rates steady. Trump, who viewed lower rates as a catalyst for growth, saw this as defiance. He took to Truth Social, his preferred platform, to lambaste Powell, calling him too late and accusing him of sabotaging the economy. The Fed's $2.5 billion renovation project, already a point of contention due to its cost overruns, became a convenient cudgel. Trump and his allies, including Office of Management and Budget Director Russell Vought and Federal Housing Finance Agency Director Bill Pulte, seized on the project as evidence of Powell's mismanagement. Vaught's July 10 letter to Powell, posted on X, accused the Fed of plowing ahead with an ostentatious overhaul and hinted that the cost overruns could justify Powell's removal. A move that legal scholars deemed unlikely to withstand scrutiny given the Fed's protected independence. The renovation itself was no small undertaking. The Mariner S. Beckles building, constructed in the 1930s, and the 1951 Constitution Avenue building were in dire need of upgrades. Antiquated electrical, plumbing, and HVAC systems, some dating back to the Great Depression, posed safety and operational risks. Asbestos and lead contamination required costly mitigation, and rising material costs, exacerbated by Trump's own 2018 tariffs on steel and aluminum, had driven the budget from an initial $1.9 billion to $2.5 billion. The Fed, in a rare move, launched a public relations counteroffensive, posting an FAQ page on its website to debunk claims of VIP dining rooms and rooftop terrace gardens. Powell himself testified before Congress in June, dismissing reports of lavish features and attributing the overruns to inflation and the complexity of renovating historic buildings. As July 24 approached, the stage was set for a showdown. Trump announced his visit on Truth Social, stating he would be joined by Vought, Pulte, Senator Tim Scott, chair of the Senate Banking Committee, and various construction professionals. The inclusion of Scott, who had recently pressed Powell for answers about the renovation, signaled that the visit was as much about political theater as it was about construction oversight. For Powell, the visit was a chance to defend the Fed's work, and his own leadership, in the face of mounting pressure. The tour begins. On the morning of July 24, 2025, the Federal Reserve's headquarters buzzed with an unusual energy. Construction workers in hard hats moved purposefully through the site, their drills and hammers echoing off the marble walls. The Eccles building, with its classical facade and intricate stonework, stood partially shrouded in scaffolding, a testament to the scale of the renovation. The adjacent 1951, Constitution Avenue building, with its more modern but equally dated design, was also undergoing extensive work. The project included new glass atria, an underground parking garage, and critical updates to fire detection and suppression systems. The Fed had taken pains to ensure transparency, hosting a media tour earlier that day to highlight the necessity of the upgrades and counter claims of extravagance. At around noon, Trump's motorcade pulled up to the site. The president, dressed in a navy suit and red tie, stepped out with a confident stride, his signature white hard hat slightly askew. Powell, also in a hard hat, greeted him with a polite but reserved handshake. The two men, flanked by aides and reporters, began their tour in the Eccles building's grand atrium, where original ceiling details were being carefully preserved. Senator Tim Scott, OMB Director Russell Vought, and FHFA Director Bill Pulte followed closely, their presence underscoring the political weight of the moment. As they walked through the construction zone, Trump's demeanor was a mix of curiosity and skepticism. He gestured toward the exposed beams and asked pointed questions about the materials being used. Powell, ever the technocrat, responded with measured explanations, detailing the challenges of working with century-old infrastructure and the need to comply with historic preservation standards. The group paused at the entrance to a two-story boardroom, jokingly dubbed the Oval Office by workers due to its oval reception area. Trump, seizing the moment, turned to the cameras and began to speak. The clash over costs. The exchange that followed would become the defining moment of the visit. Standing side by side in their hard hats, Trump and Powell faced a gaggle of reporters eager for a soundbite. Trump, never one to shy away from the spotlight, launched into a critique of the renovation's cost. "It looks like it's about $3.1 billion, he declared, his voice carrying the confidence of a man accustomed to commanding attention. "It went up a little bit, or a lot." Powell, standing just inches away, visibly stiffened. He closed his eyes briefly, shook his head, and interjected, "I'm not aware of that." The Fed chair's tone was calm but firm, a stark contrast to Trump's bombast. Trump, undeterred, reached into his jacket pocket and produced a folded piece of paper, which he handed to Powell with a flourish. "Yeah, it just came out," Trump said, implying that the figure was fresh from the Fed itself. Powell, donning his reading glasses, scanned the document. The cameras captured every second of the awkward silence that followed, 7 seconds that felt like an eternity. Finally, Powell looked up, his expression a mix of exasperation and resolve. "You just added in a third building," he said, referring to the William McChesney Martin building, a separate Fed office renovated 5 years earlier. "It's not new. We finished Martin 5 years ago." Trump, unfazed, tried to press his point. "It's part of the overall work," he said, turning to face the cameras. But Powell held his ground. "It's not new," he repeated, his voice cutting through the tension. The exchange was a rare public rebuke of a sitting president by a government official, and it underscored the growing rift between the two men. For Trump, the $3.1 billion figure was a weapon to wield against Powell. For Powell, it was a misrepresentation that needed to be corrected in real time. The reporters, sensing blood in the water, pressed further. One asked Trump if the cost overruns were a fireable offense. Trump, perhaps aware of the legal constraints on removing a Fed chair, sidestepped the question. "Look, I would love to see it completed," he said, softening his tone. "I don't want to put that in this category." But he couldn't resist adding, "We want to see interest rates come down." The comment was a reminder that the renovation, while a focal point, was secondary to Trump's broader goal of pressuring the Fed to ease monetary policy. The broader context. The clash over the renovation costs was not an isolated incident but part of a larger battle over the Federal Reserve's role in American economic life. Since its creation in 1913, the Fed has operated as an independent institution, tasked with managing monetary policy free from political interference. Its dual mandate, to promote maximum employment and stable prices, often puts it at odds with presidents eager for short-term economic wins. Trump, with his focus on immediate growth and his aversion to high interest rates, saw the Fed's independence as an obstacle. His allies, including Vaught and Pulte, amplified this view, framing the renovation as a symbol of bureaucratic excess and Powell as a symbol of resistance. The renovation project itself was a lightning rod for criticism. Initially approved in 2017 by the Fed's Board of Governors, the project had faced scrutiny from local commissions, including the Commission for Fine Arts and the National Capital Planning Commission. Some of Trump's own appointees to these bodies had pushed for more marble in the design, arguing it better suited the building's historic character, a decision that ironically contributed to the cost overruns now being used against Powell. The Fed's FAQ page, launched in response to the growing controversy, outlined the main drivers of the increased costs: inflation, tariffs, and the discovery of additional asbestos and lead. The project's scope, which included modernizing systems and ensuring compliance with historic preservation standards, added further complexity. Beyond the renovation, the real issue was interest rates. Trump's economic agenda, which included sweeping tariffs on imports, had raised concerns about inflation. Powell and the Federal Open Market Committee, wary of stoking price increases, had opted to hold rates steady since Trump's return to office. This decision frustrated Trump, who believed lower rates would boost investment and job creation. His public attacks on Powell, including suggestions that he might fire him, were seen by some as an attempt to undermine the Fed's credibility. Yet legal precedent, reinforced by a recent Supreme Court ruling, suggested that removing a Fed chair, for cause, would require evidence of misconduct, not policy disagreements, a high bar that the renovation controversy alone was unlikely to meet. The aftermath. As the tour concluded, Trump and Powell parted ways, their hard hats a symbol of the uneasy truce between them. Trump, speaking to reporters alone afterward, struck a conciliatory tone. "I thought we had a good meeting," he said, insisting there was no tension and expressing confidence that Powell would do the right thing on interest rates. The shift in tone was strategic. Trump, aware of the legal and political risks of pushing for Powell's removal, sought to project magnanimity while keeping the pressure on. Powell, for his part, remained steadfast. In a letter to Senator Tim Scott the following week, he provided detailed answers about the renovation's oversight and costs, reiterating that the project was necessary and closely monitored. The Fed also announced that its Inspector General would review the project, a move seen as an attempt to defuse criticism and demonstrate accountability. Yet the controversy was far from over. Posts on X reflected the polarized sentiment. Some users praised Trump for exposing bureaucratic bloat, while others derided the visit as a political stunt aimed at bullying the Fed. The visit had broader implications for the Fed's independence. Financial markets, already jittery from Trump's tariff proposals, reacted cautiously, with analysts warning that any move to fire Powell could destabilize investor confidence. Congressional Republicans, once defenders of Powell, were increasingly vocal in their criticism, with figures like Scott and Pulte amplifying the White House's narrative. Meanwhile, Democrats and some economists warned that eroding the Fed's autonomy could have long-term consequences for economic stability. A reflection on power and independence. The events of July 24, 2025, were a microcosm of a larger struggle, the tension between political power and institutional independence. Trump, with his populist instincts and disdain for bureaucratic norms, saw the Fed as an obstacle to his vision of a booming economy. Powell, with his commitment to data-driven policy and institutional integrity, represented a counterweight. An unelected official standing firm against a president's demands. The Renovation project, with its marble facades and ballooning costs, was less the issue than a convenient symbol in a broader war of wills. For the American public, the episode was a reminder of the delicate balance that underpins the nation's economy. The Federal Reserve, for all its opacity, plays a critical role in managing inflation and employment, decisions that affect everything from mortgage rates to job opportunities. Trump's visit, while theatrical, highlighted the stakes of this balance. Could a president bend the Fed to his will without undermining its credibility? Could the Fed maintain its independence without appearing aloof or unaccountable? As the dust settled, the Renovation project continued, its completion date set for fall 2027. Powell remained in his role, his term as Fed chair set to end in 2026, though his position on the Board of Governors extended to 2028. Trump, meanwhile, shifted focus to other priorities, from tariffs to trade deals, but his feud with Powell lingered as a reminder of the uneasy coexistence of politics and policy. Epilogue: The legacy of the visit. The image of Trump and Powell, standing side by side in hard hats, would linger in the public imagination, a snapshot of a moment when two visions of America's economic future collided. For Trump, it was a chance to assert dominance; for Powell, it was a defense of principle. The Renovation, with its $2.5 billion price tag and $600 million in overruns, became a footnote in a larger story of power, accountability, and the enduring question of who controls the nation's economic destiny.